Well, Trekkies and Trekkers, time for the final episode review of the day, which is going to be too short a season. So, here we go. The Federation Starship Enterprise, under the command of Captain Jean-Luc Picard, brings aboard the elderly Mark Jameson and his wife Anne, on request of Karnas, the governor of Mordan IV. Karnas warns that a dissident terrorist group has taken a Federation ambassador and his staff hostage, demand to speak to a negotiator. Jameson had negotiated previous settlement on Mordan IV. As the ship travels to Mordan IV, they find that Jameson is becoming stronger and more able to move about on his own, and is no longer showing the signs of the terminal Iverson's disease he was known to have before he was beamed aboard. The crew discovers that Jameson has been taking an array of drugs to reverse the aging process over the last 2 years, and only recently has taken an overdose of the drugs to prepare himself for the negotiations. Jameson begins to appear younger and full of energy, but has frequent pains as a result of the overdose. By the time they are nearing Mordan, Jameson now appears as a young adult. Okay then. As they approach the planet, Jameson begins audio communication with Karnas to learn more of the situation, but soon discovers that it is Karnas himself that has taken the Federation staff. Karnas reminds Jameson that his treachery during their last encounter on Mordan IV resulted in years of war. Against the advice of Picard, Jameson devises plans to rescue the hostages by transporting the away team, now including the captain, to the tunnels beneath Karnas' mansion, where Jameson believes the hostages are being held. Picard privately confronts Jameson about Karnas' motives. Jameson reveals that in the past, Karnas had captured a Federation starliner in revenge for the death of his father by another local tribe. Jameson had negotiated for the passengers' release by giving Karnas what he demanded, a supply of Federation weapons. However, Jameson, in his interpretation of the Prime Directive, also supplied the warring tribes with an equal number of weapons. Jameson had thought this would only lead to a short-lived skirmish, and had not expected a war that would last over 40 years. Jameson is now insistent on correcting his past mistake, and thus took the reverse aging drug in order to be at his best. Bad move, Buckaroo. In orbit, the Enterprise crew and Jameson beam down to the tunnels beneath Karnas' manor, but find that their arrival was anticipated and face off against armed guards. Jameson collapses during the fight, and the crew beams back to the Enterprise, where they discover Jameson was not shot but instead the reverse aging drug is destroying his body. Well, that's not good. Karnas demands to see Jameson or he will kill a hostage every 15 minutes. Picard opts to beam himself, Dr. Crusher, Jameson, and eventually Jameson's wife Anne directly to Karnas' office. Though Karnas initially refuses to believe that the young man is Jameson, Picard shows him the images of his reverse aging over the last few days, after which Jameson reveals a scar on his wrist inflicted by Karnas years ago. Karnas prepares to fire on Jameson to get his revenge, but decides to get his revenge by watching Jameson suffer and die horribly from the drug instead. Jameson dies shortly after his wife's embrace. Karnas agrees to let the hostages go and to allow Jameson to be buried on Mordan IV at Anne's request. Aww. That was kind of sweet, I guess. Anyway, let's look at some production notes here. Writer Michael Gillian originally pitched a story idea based on andropause, sometimes referred to as male menopause. He wrote a treatment and first draft script involving reverse aging. D.C. Fontana later explained that the terrorist MacGuffin, ambiguous but central plot point, was not quite right. Fontana was brought in to overhaul the ending, and explained that a quote, lot of what I put in at the end was also in Michael's story and drafts, but approached with a different emphasis. One significant alteration she made was to change the plot from involving actual terrorists to a trap that the crew must defuse. The original ending also had the two opposing parties on the planet sit down for peace talks with Jameson, surviving the effects of the de-aging drugs. He would have been reduced in age to 14 and could no longer remember his wife. Well, that wouldn't have been good. Clayton Rohner was cast as Admiral Mark Jameson. Prior to filming, Rohner and director Rob Bowman worked together on weekends on the characterization of Jameson. Bowman criticized the style of the script, describing it as, quote, sit and tell. He also had a variety of problems with the wheelchair in this episode, which cost $10,000 to construct. As referred to by plot designer Joe Longo as the, quote, big albatross, and when a wheelchair was required for the Deep Space Nine episode Melora, instead created a much simpler version. Kronos is played by Michael Pataki, who previously played the Klingon Korax in the original series episode The Trouble with Tribbles. Nice! Makeup supervisor Michael Westmore had previously used makeup to age DeForest Kelly in the season premiere of Counter Farpoint, but Too Short a Season proved a unique challenge as 4 stages of makeup were required to show Admiral Jameson de-aging. The initial stage, to show Jameson as his oldest, involved Roner wearing a bald cap and a wig plus latex prosthetics applied to his eyes, forehead, throat, and jowls. That stage took up to 4 hours to apply to the actor. Westmore found himself worn out by the volume of work during this episode, as at the time the makeup team on the series included just him and Warren Kepler. On the second day of shooting the first stage of makeup, Westmore arrived after Roner had been in makeup for 3 hours, only to find he was only half finished. Kepler and Westmore rushed to get him so as not to delay the filming of the episode. Bowman later criticized the makeup used on Roner, describing it as subpar. Westmore said that, quote, if I was working on a film and had several months to test Clayton's makeup beforehand, it probably would have turned out more to my liking. With less than a week to work with, I didn't think it turned out too badly. Too Short a Season marked the last time a cityscape would be built as a model for the show until the 6th season episode Birthright. They were instead replaced with matte paintings. Phasers from the original series and movies, along with the staff from The Last Outpost, were used to decorate Karnas's office. So overall, this is a pretty interesting episode, and having someone go from old to young in an episode is actually quite interesting. So overall, I give Too Short a Season 3 warp cores out of 5. Well, join me tomorrow as Star Trek Timber continues with When the Bow Breaks. So, until then, live long and prosper, everybody.